So chances are you can recognize your favorite song is just from hearing a tiny fragment of the opening bars. So those sorts of memories are stored in our hippocampus, right? Which is the part of the brain where listening to music produces neurons and it improves that part of the memory. But simply remembering how a tune goes or what the chorus lyrics are that are repeated 6 times in the song is just one type of memory within music. There are actually many different kinds of memory used in music. And according to this wonderful website, themusicianbrain.com, all information enters the brain through our senses or sensory memory. So if you think about it, when we are learning a piece, we are taking in the visual, the auditory, the tactile, and proprioceptive information, which was a new word for me, and that relates to where we are physically in the space where we're listening to what we are playing. All of those sensory aspects are parts of the memory as well. This is where it starts to get really cool. Okay, the capacity of short-term memory can be increased by chunking individual pieces of information into larger patterns. So basically recoding the information in the brain, right? Now, you know I love chunking. I was so excited to find this out because this is Piano Picnic learning. And this is the idea behind the 2-minute lessons that we have within the courses of Piano Picnic. They're little morsels, little chunks, and then you have a little one and you go, and you taste it, right? You understand that 2-minute lesson, and then you go back for another one because it's almost like it's just too easy. It's not enough. And you go back for another one, and then you keep learning. So Piano Picnic is based on this idea of chunking. That this is how we can embrace that this is how the short-term memory works. Let's hear an example. So if I say the numbers 1002198, and you have to remember that 8-digit number as 8 digits, it's very difficult for us to hold that in our short-term memory. It's, can you remember what numbers I just said? The way we can remember 8-digit numbers, for instance, is to attach it to something else we know. For instance, we could make it a date of the year. So instead of 1002198, it can become the 10th of February, the second month of the year, 1938, right? 10th of February, 1938. That means something. And so I can remember it, remember what it means, and then later if I'm trying to come up with the numbers, I can just decipher the meaning back into the numbers, right? So we do that. That's a form of chunking, is adding meaning, and you're also chunking it into the 3 sections of numbers that have meaning. When we are learning a piece of music and you have individual notes that you're trying to remember, and it's so difficult to remember that it goes C to E to B to G back to C again, right? All those individual notes. But if we chunk it, and the most common form and basic way that we can chunk notes is to know what chords they're making, right? Instead of using the dates of a year to remember numbers, we can use chords and chord progressions to remember notes. So instead of having to remember C, E, G, B, we can look at those notes and go, well, that's a C major 7. That's way easier to remember than having to remember all those individual notes, okay? So chunking obviously is based on a certain amount of prior knowledge. We need to have a certain amount of music theory knowledge in order to chunk the information of the pieces that we're learning. This is why I think theory is so fundamental to playing any instrument, being any kind of musician. So short-term memory disappears unless we make an effort to transfer it to long-term memory, which is what we do when we practice something over and over and over. We are encoding that information into our long-term memory. That comes down to your repetition, usually on a daily basis, repeating, or at least every other day, the music that you've learned in order to put it into your long-term memory. So you do have to sort of go back and dip into that memory bank and just make sure that you're saying, yes, I still need this memory. Otherwise, your brain goes through the filing system and starts to chuck out things that you don't need, right? That's what it's doing all the time. And then when you repeat things, you're saying, this is important. This is important. Don't chuck this out. Don't chuck this out. It's like putting it in a folder on your desktop that says, don't delete. How do we do this? We do this mostly with repetition and practice, as I said, but there are other methods of hurrying along this process of putting it into long-term memory. I know you guys are going to want to know this. Identifying patterns and relationships in the music. So that's that theory knowledge, being able to group it into chords. That's a relationship in the music. Those notes relate to each other in terms of being a chord, and identifying patterns. So there's a motif. The motif is repeated but slightly up again. And then again. And then it differs. Also, we can learn more about the piece, about the composer, about the culture or the era in which it was composed. Being able to attach more information around it makes it more of a thing in our brain, rather than I just have to remember these notes. It's like this piece has a whole story around it, and when we attach the story, it makes it easier, more of a thing for our brain to latch onto. We identify emotions that the piece of music brings up, or the emotions of the story that the piece is telling, right? So not only is there a story around the piece, how it happened in the world, but also the story that the piece is telling and what emotions maybe it's identifying for you, what it means to you. If it has lyrics, dig into the lyrics, find out what those lyrics mean for you. And as I said before, emotion and memory are very much intertwined. And lastly, associating pictures, a visual representation to go with that song, or even, you could have a visual representation to go with sections of the song. And we naturally look for patterns and relationships within life. So that part of it is not difficult. It's the little bit of research that we can put in to make that a bit more effective. The digging that we can do into what story or emotions or pictures that is bringing up. We can stimulate this process more than what just happens naturally. We can do it a bit more purposefully. That's a little bit about taking it into long-term memory. Now, let's look at memory for playing by ear. The training at the end of this month for members is going to be on memory, and the course that I'm releasing, that we're getting up to, is on ear training. So how does this all link together? Well, when we play a song by ear, we are remembering how the song goes in order to hear it in our mind, in order to work it out. This is why, the first step is to listen. And the reason you listen and listen again before you even go to your instrument is because you need to have memorized how the song goes in order to translate it. Why? Because we don't go from recording that we're listening to, play the tape, stop the tape. I'm using old-fashioned references, but play the tape, stop the tape, try and find it on the piano, play it a bit more, stop it, try and find it on the piano. That's not how we do it. That's how people do it when they don't know what they're doing. We don't do it like that. We listen to the song enough times that it's gone into our brain and that we can remember it, at least in our short-term memory, in order to then make some associations with what we know about music theory, and then translate that onto our instrument, okay? What's that called? We don't do key stabbing around in the dark. That is our memory already, first step in the process. But it's not just about memorizing an entire song in order to play it. We need to use our memory to recognize smaller patterns that we hear. So, if you're listening to a melody and you hear a motif and then it's repeated later, exactly the same way, then you need to be able to retrieve that and recognize that through remembering that motive from before, right? Same with individual notes. If you've already found a note on the piano from a previous part of the song, and then you hear that note again, or that interval again, remembering that you've already figured that out is crucial to cutting down the amount of time that you spend working out a song, right? If you had absolutely no memory involved, you would have to work out every single individual note in the song individually from scratch every single time, right? But we don't do that. And naturally we go, when you've figured out a note and you go, okay, that other note is slightly above that last note that I've already figured out. You know, our memory is already naturally working there, but we can also work to make that more concentrated. And we do that by gradually longer and longer exercises of learning notes by ear training, right? That's what the course is going to be. So your memory for playing by ear is specifically going to be harnessed and trained in this forthcoming course called Eartelligence, which we named together, didn't we? Listening, learning, and playing music uses many different areas of our brain and different types of our memory as well. But if we want to improve our memory of music in order to play by ear, in order to memorize pieces in the short term and in the long term, then you need to commit those to long-term memory, and it's not going to happen by accident. You can use these techniques, learn more music theory in order to identify relationships and patterns within the music that you're playing. You can practice learning and memorizing songs and pieces deliberately by chunking using that knowledge that you've gathered, that prior knowledge. You can research the music you learn in order to insert a story and more meaning behind and around how the song was made, and also what the song itself means. And you can also observe the story and emotional connection you have with the song and also attach images to it. Essentially, we're attaching meaning, we're attaching background, we're attaching visuals, we're attaching emotions, and we're attaching, technical information and that chunking idea from our music theory knowledge, all of those things in order to better memorize the music that we learn. Now, you should sign up for my active listening challenge. I'm going to give you a taste of how to use your ear more purposefully when you listen to music in order to play by ear better. Lovely to see you guys here. Have a wonderful week. Remember to play it like you mean it.
Play it like you mean it.
Play it like you mean it.
Play it like you mean it. Play it like you mean it.
Play it like you mean it.
Play it like you mean it.
Play it like you mean it. And I'll see you next time.